New updates in the Sean Diddy Combs legal saga. The rap mogul gets an official sentencing date. He gets hit with allegations from a shocking new lawsuit. A juror speaks out, and also, apparently, Diddy receives a standing ovation from inmates?
The world wasn't ready for what Diddy's daughters just revealed. 4 months. People have been speculating, whispering, trying to piece together what really went on behind closed doors.
We have a verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, but I'll tell you what, this case, not over. No. Important hearing today, sort of. We got to talk about why. Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts. But he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place. Very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week when it was the October 3rd date that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of Your Honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict, but clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge, because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC. So if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, there are the extremes. When you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, it seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely, in that you're dealing with multiple instances of transporting Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims in this case, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. You could say this is an aggravating factor. Why don't...
But no one expected his own daughters to come forward with an emotional confession that would shatter everything Diddy tried so hard to protect. What they said didn't just expose the man behind the music. It tore down the carefully built image he spent decades maintaining. This wasn't some random interview or staged PR stunt. This was raw, emotional, and completely unfiltered. When Diddy's daughters started talking, the room fell silent. You could feel the weight in their voices, the kind of pain that doesn't come from rumor or gossip, but from lived experience. They spoke with emotion, trembling but determined, revealing secrets that Diddy had buried deep, secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. And what they shared has now sent shockwaves through the entire industry. According to sources close to the family, the girls have been struggling with what they've known for years. They've carried the burden of his actions, his choices, and the dark shadow that's followed their family since the first allegations against him surfaced. For the longest time, they stayed silent, partly out of fear, partly out of loyalty, but something snapped. The truth became too heavy to keep. One insider says the confession
So good to see you. I haven't seen you in like 2 months in person.
It's been a while.
It has been a while, and you did great reporting. You're here. We did sidebar recaps every day.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get into this monumental hearing, and I'm being sarcastic, you'll see in a second, Combs' defense counsel filed a letter with the court that outlined a brand new schedule. Then after the hearing, it was changed. What was the back and forth in terms of schedules? What's happening
I
now?
know. To your point, Jesse, it really was a back and forth. First, it was September 22nd. Now it's October 3rd. And it was something that the judge initially put on the schedule as Diddy's sentencing hearing. And then, back and forth happened. And now it's back to October 3rd, which I like to call Mean Girls Day. And so it was a lot of kind of going on here. And a lot of us were kind of confused as to, is it going to be September? Is it going to be October? But now it's official. It's going to be October. And there's a reason for it. There's a lot of stuff, like you had just mentioned, that both sides have to kind of work through. The defense was proposing that the probation office provide the parties with a pre-sentence investigation report, or a PSR, on or before August 29th. The defense objections to the PSR report will be filed on or before September 5th. And so a bunch of documents need to be filed. Diddy needs to be interviewed. Other people need to be interviewed. But it looks like we'll hear that sentencing hearing on October 3rd. It'll be kind of a big bow to a very long case. We'll see what the judge kind of goes for in terms of the sentencing. It could be, like you had mentioned, to the lower side, to the higher side. But I hate guessing in this trial at this point, because every guess that I've made has been completely wrong. So.
No, we both agreed he would get convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, racketeering, sex trafficking, both up in the air. I'm not surprised by the jury's decision, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and Jesse, just some more to the schedule. For any post-verdict motions, the parties proposed that the defense file any post-verdict motions on or before July 30th of this year, and the government respond on or before August 20th. And then the government requests that if they be permitted to submit its summary of offense conduct on or before July 11th of 2025, and the defense doesn't object to that. So we'll see a lot more documents being filed that we're able to kind of talk about, hopefully a little bit more, but it seems that it's just a bunch of documents that'll be filed before the eventual sentencing hearing.
You know what I think is interesting? The post-trial motions. So typically speaking, those could be like a motion for a new trial, where the court would vacate the judgment and allow for a new trial, rarely granted, but may be done if the interest of justice so requires. There's a motion for judgment of acquittal, so the court could set aside the jury's verdict, allow the defendant to go free. And there's a motion to vacate, set aside, or correct a sentence, and I'm told that it's often successful for the purpose of correcting when there's a clerical error in the sentence. Now, assuming Combs has valid legal grounds to support any of this, I imagine he will file whatever motion he can for relief from either the verdict or the sentence. Then again, I don't know. He got a very favorable ruling. Obviously, he was convicted. He's not entirely happy with it, and his defense counsel explained that. But they also, in their press conference after the verdict, they were jubilant. They were ecstatic. And I wonder, if he gets a favorable sentence, is he even going to challenge this? I mean, they seem happy.
Yeah, they seem ecstatic, because the emotions that kind of ran outside of the courtroom, it was kind of double that inside the courtroom, where all the defense attorneys were hugging, they were crying. So seeing them outside in the press conference, all kind of holding hands, going up, that was just a little slice of the cake from what we all saw inside that federal courtroom. But I think it can kind of go both ways, and that's mainly because Sean Combs is still behind bars right now. The judge didn't grant him bail even after the verdict, and I think his reasoning might give us a little kind of picture into what the sentencing might possibly look like, because the judge even pointed out during his denying of Diddy's bail after his conviction, which were on counts 3 and 5, kind of talking back to what had happened in June of 2024 with Jane and the violent altercation that happened over at Jane's apartment. And so I'm thinking, if the judge is already kind of on his mind about the whole domestic violence aspect and the physical violence.
Came after weeks of emotional tension, where the girls couldn't hide their pain anymore. They'd been seeing the headlines, hearing the attacks, and watching their father's name get dragged through every possible scandal. But this time, instead of defending him, they decided to speak their truth, and that truth has blown the entire situation wide open. Their words painted a picture that was hard to listen to, a picture of a father who wasn't the man the public saw on stage or in interviews. They talked about the pressure, the fear, the control. They talked about moments they tried to forget, moments that still haunt them. People who've heard their statements say it's heartbreaking. These weren't accusations made for fame or attention. They were cries for release. Years of silence finally cracked open, and what spilled out was painful, emotional, and undeniably real. Social media erupted the moment their confession hit. Fans who once idolized Diddy were left speechless. Supporters turned skeptical. Some even
that was exuded from the defendant even just last year. I think it's possible maybe the judge, even if he hears from the family, even if he hears from Sean Combs' friends, that it's possible it might be kind of a little bit of a tougher sentence than maybe the defense was expecting.
Well, look, I think the defense might be wanting to take advantage of this, right? Now, the judge said, even though I'm denying bail and I'm looking at the violence factor, it's not a preview of what I'm going to do for sentencing. But I think this is the opportunity for the defense to submit any kind of mitigating factors and have the probation officer speak to his friends and family and talk about the impact of this. I mean, we just interviewed Charlucci the other day. So I wonder if they're saying, you know what? They said to Sean Combs, listen, let's wait for October. Gives us more time to present our case to Judge Arun Subramanian. And then we had the hearing today. This monumental hearing.
Great.
You've been in court for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
This was what, like 7 seconds?
I think maybe even less than, I would say,
What
kind
happened?
of close to 5. So
Yeah.
get all the way down to the courthouse. I'm like seeing everybody
Which
from
is not
the trial.
close from here,
No,
so people know.
it's not. It's not. And it was hot outside too. So
all the way downtown,
walking
yeah.
all the way down, or not, I didn't walk all the way downtown, from the subway to the walk to the courthouse.
Okay.
Get there, check in all my stuff. I would say the security check-in was longer than the actual hearing.
Okay.
So it was a remote hearing. We didn't see Sean Combs in person. We didn't see any of the attorneys on both sides. We didn't even see the judge. And so what had happened was we get inside kind of the overflow room.
Oh, the overflow room, okay.
Yep. So we get inside the overflow room. There's a big giant screen. It's completely black, but then you hear Sean Combs' voice being like, Mark, are you there? And so it was kind of like one of those dial-in type of hearings. And so we heard Mark Agnifilo's voice. Then all of a sudden we hear the prosecution's voice. It was Christy Slavic. She was accompanied by Emily Johnson, both who work on behalf of the government. And then all of a sudden, Mark Agnifilo was kind of like, you know what, we were able to work everything out as far as our sentencing date goes. And then the judge's clerk is like, oh, okay, so both parties agree, and then this matter is adjourned.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I worried that's what was going to be because when they had the letter basically working out the date, I was like, oh, what are they going to talk about? And then after that hearing is when they switched it back to October 3rd.
Yeah.
So not much there. You didn't see Sean Combs. Okay, let's talk about some other things that have been going on. First of all, big news. There's a new lawsuit that came out against Sean Combs. Okay, this is pretty disgusting. You have this unidentified John Doe who claims that in September of 2020, so relatively recently, he, Diddy, and others, they go to this warehouse out in LA that apparently contains some of the clothes of Notorious B.I.G., the rapper who was shot and killed in 1997, Sean Combs' friend. And people start taking drugs. They start wandering around this warehouse. And this John Doe claims that Combs started watching pornography on his phone. And that is when he claims, again, warning, pretty disgusting allegation, that Combs grabbed one of Biggie's t-shirts and pleasured himself with it, into it. I don't know how the best way to explain it. And even alleging that John Doe, or insisting that John Doe finish the job, so to speak. And he then claimed Combs threw the spoiled shirt onto John Doe and said, "Rip Biggie," then left. He also claimed that 15 years earlier, Combs told him to perform oral sex on him, reportedly suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress, sexual battery. Don't have a ton of information, but for somebody who has been following so many of the civil lawsuits that he now faces, 66, 67, 68, how does this fit into all of them?
Well, it seems like it's just kind of showing a path.
That they felt betrayed, realizing that the man they grew up watching might have been living a double life, one as a superstar and one as a father with a dark, hidden past. The public's perception shifted instantly. This wasn't just another scandal. This was his own blood calling him out. What's even more disturbing is how specific the details were. These weren't vague stories or second-hand claims. They talked about what they saw, what they heard, and how it shaped who they became. They described moments that no child should ever experience, moments of confusion, isolation, and emotional trauma. And the craziest part? Diddy's team didn't see it coming. According to people close to him, he was blindsided, completely caught off guard. He didn't expect his daughters to go public, especially not now, when his entire life is already unraveling in front of the world. They say when he found out, he lost it, yelling, crying, demanding to know who convinced them to talk. But it wasn't anyone else, it was them. They made that decision together. Behind the scenes, there's chaos. His legal team is scrambling. trying to manage
A pattern that all the lawsuits seem to kind of allege of power, control, sexual pleasure, all of that stuff. I would say the timing of it is a little surprising given that it came after the verdict a little bit, but I think it kind of, again, goes to that pattern that a lot of the other civil suits we've seen, and these can be by just different attorneys too. It's not always the same attorney who's filing these suits, but it seems like they all kind of go to this pattern, it seems. But again, I'm just more surprised at the timing of it and when this was filed too.
To be clear, there are lawsuits that he's facing that contain allegations that were never discussed in any way in the criminal case.
Right.
But in the criminal case, was it ever alleged that he sexually assaulted men? Was it ever alleged that he grabbed men or forced them to do things, or was it mostly focused upon women?
Seems like it was mostly focused on women and that being the victims in this case. I think as far as just kind of the allegations towards men were really just having to do with the escorts or the entertainers, as they were also called in the criminal trial. But for the most part, it seemed like from what we heard in the criminal trial, which I know a lot of people are a little disappointed because they thought it would be a lot more, but really it was just kind of like just different isolated incidents involving two victims, being Jane and Cassie. But it seemed like there wasn't a lot of discussion about male victims in this trial, but there were little points that were brought up in terms of like the civil matters, those including like Bonna and her civil claim, Dawn Richard and her civil claim. I think even during the cross-examination of Cassie, one of the defense attorneys, that would be Anna Esteval, she had asked, was the baby oil laced? And I was thinking back to the civil claims, because a lot of civil claims had, a lot of civil suits had claimed that
And it wasn't laced.
That it was, the civil suits claimed it was laced, but then in the criminal trial, Cassie had confirmed that the baby oil was never laced with any type of narcotics or anything like that.
By the way, Combs' legal team said in a statement to Page 6, quote, Mr. Combs' trial and acquittal on trafficking and RICO charges proves what we have been saying all along. Mr. Combs never sexually assaulted or trafficked anyone. That people continue to broadcast and file false accusations, no matter how heinous and uncorroborated, is unfortunate. But Mr. Combs will not back down. He will fight for as long as necessary to win his full vindication. I talked about it on a previous sidebar how he might tackle all these lawsuits, maybe motions to dismiss, maybe try to say, these Jane and John Doe shouldn't proceed under pseudonyms. If you can convince a court of that, they may be reluctant to continue the case if they have to expose their identities. He might try to get rid of them at initial stages as much as possible.
And he was successful at that at the beginning, too.
Yeah, a few of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the jurors, okay? So first, a juror has spoken out since the verdict. Not surprising, we had a feeling this would happen. This unnamed juror apparently spoke to ABC and said that the public reaction to this decision, quote, is highly insulting and belittling to the jury and the deliberation process. We spent over 2 days deliberating. Our decision was based solely on the evidence presented and how the law is stated. We would have treated any defendant in the same manner regardless of who they are. I have nothing else to say. Now, you watched the jury, okay? And we'll talk about what an alternate juror had to say too, but you watched the jury. You watched them day in and day out. What do you make of that statement?
I was a little surprised by that statement, just a little bit, only because, and I shouldn't say anything surprising to me when it comes to this trial, I found that statement surprising only because we clearly had heard the same evidence. Obviously, they saw a little bit more than I saw being inside the gallery. Some of the exhibits we weren't able to see, that sort, and that included, the freak-off tapes, the hotel night tapes, all of that stuff. And so I was surprised by the jury's decision.
the fallout. His publicists are working overtime, trying to spin the story or discredit what was said. But how do you discredit your own family? How do you deny the emotional pain written all over their faces? There's no script, no damage control that can fix this. Because this isn't just bad publicity, this is personal. Insiders say Diddy has tried to reach out to them, but they're refusing contact. They don't want apologies. They don't want excuses. They just want the truth to be known. They've reportedly said that they're tired of living in the shadow of lies. They want to heal, even if that means breaking the image of the man the world thought they knew. The confession has also reignited old questions. People are now digging deeper, connecting dots between the daughter's words and the long list of rumors and allegations that have surrounded Diddy for years. Things that didn't make sense before suddenly do. The missing pieces are starting to fit. And what's emerging is a version of Diddy that's far darker and more disturbing than anyone expected. Those closest to the family say this isn't just a media storm, it's a complete emotion.
Picked up Deontay angrily and even expressed just kind of violence sometimes towards Deontay, and that essentially Derrick Rose, that being Diddy's stylist, Diddy and Cassie all went to the bathroom, fixed her hair, for the result to be that Diddy actually ended up liking Cassie's hair down a lot better, something that they had originally done after they put her hair up. So then we get into Cassie's music and just that she was in the studio a lot. She was working towards the album, but Diddy would threaten to not release her music. We go for a lunch break. I chat with you for a little bit, then we come back, and then they go more into the violence, just that Deontay had experienced.
By the way, financial control also part of the indictment, right?
Yes.
That Combs would use that as a way to get what he wanted.
Yes.
Again, important for racketeering and sex
And then
trafficking.
obviously the defense was going to poke holes into that, being like, oh, you know, and we'll get into this more, but that Cassie's music was still fine, that she was still recording with these big name artists, but we'll go more into that in just a second. But as far as just more of the violence that Deontay experienced, he said that there was a particular time where Mia, who we know will be testifying very soon, Mia is a pseudonym, but used to work for Diddy under his employment as an assistant, but that there was this moment where Deontay, Mia, and Cassie were all in Cassie's Los Angeles apartment. Mia and Deontay were over kind of helping Cassie pack for this music festival that she was going to do called OVO Fest. It's a music festival by Drake. Cassie was asleep, and then all of a sudden, Deontay heard a knock at the door, and so he answered the door, and it's Diddy. And that Diddy said the B word to Cassie and said, "Didn't I tell you to answer the phone?" Something that a lot of witnesses have testified to, saying that Diddy was very aggressive, essentially, whenever Cassie didn't answer her phone, and then he would respond, have other assistants respond, have security reach out to her, all of that. And so what Diddy did in response was he grabbed Cassie by the hair and hit her head, pulling her off of the couch, a place where she was sleeping. And then Cassie, Deontay, and Mia ran into the bedroom, essentially trying to escape. Deontay explained that he had jumped on Diddy's back to get Diddy off of Cassie, and that Diddy pushed him off, and then Deontay fell to the floor. Then Mia jumped on Diddy's back. And again, Mia's Diddy's assistant at this time.
This is the first time that anybody's ever intervened, right?
Yeah.
And all the testimony that you've heard about her being subjected to physical abuse, this is the first time anybody tried to do something, allegedly.
Yeah, and not even beyond just stop, don't do this, I'm gonna call the police, like none of that. It was literally just like a physical, like, get off of my friend, get away from her, stop beating her up, that type of thing. And so it was pretty bad, this incident, because Cassie ended up hitting her head on the edge of the bed frame. And we all know how just kind of just the imagination of that the point where she hit her head, blood was drawn, you would think that Diddy would stop doing what he was doing at this moment, but according to Deontay, Diddy just kept on hitting her during this. So Mia ran, she grabbed some towels for Cassie's head. Deontay said that he tried to call 911, but he said that someone had told him to hang up the phone. He wasn't sure who it was that had told him to hang up the phone, but I think that also kind of plays into just essentially people not going to the authorities out of fear that they'd be retaliated against, or something would happen to them if they were to report these incidents to police. So at the end of the day, D-Rock ended up and D-Rock is a name we've heard about a lot of times. He's a security guard. That D-Rock took Cassie to a plastic surgeon, and the next day Deontay had FaceTimed Cassie, and Cassie had stitches above her forehead.
There's a lot that he just testified to, a lot of violence and the threats. Didn't he say at some point, call Combs' bluff, right, regarding
collapse from within? The daughters reportedly broke down multiple times while speaking, crying as they shared what they went through. It wasn't easy for them to say it, but it was something they felt they had to do. They wanted people to know who their father really was, not the persona he played for cameras. The industry's reaction has been mixed. Some people who once praised Diddy are now distancing themselves. Old collaborators, former friends, even business partners are staying silent or deleting posts. No one wants to be connected to this chaos. Others are expressing sympathy for the daughters, calling them brave for speaking out despite the backlash they knew would come. The emotional fallout has been massive. People who followed Diddy's career for decades are struggling to process what they've heard. It's one thing for critics to accuse him of wrongdoing. It's another thing entirely when the truth comes from his own children. That hits differently. That makes people stop and listen. And now, the question everyone's asking is, what happens next? Because this confession isn't just emotional, it could have legal consequences. Depending on what was said and how detailed their statements were, Investigators could reopen old cases or launch new ones. If those details match with other evidence that's already out there, this could be devastating for Diddy's defense. Meanwhile, the daughters have reportedly been offered protection and counseling. They're being supported by close friends and extended family who've stepped in to make sure they're safe. Because after making such explosive claims, there's fear of retaliation, fear of backlash, fear of being silenced. But even with all that, they've made it clear they don't regret speaking out. And what they said sent shockwaves through the entire industry. The image of Diddy, the mogul, the icon, the man who always seemed untouchable, is gone. In its place is something darker, something broken. The daughter's words opened a door that can't be closed. And what's behind that door has left fans questioning everything they thought they knew. Reports say Diddy was blindsided when he found out. He didn't believe it at first. He thought someone was manipulating them, twisting their words. But when he finally saw the footage, when he heard their voices, witnesses say he was silent, completely silent. The man known for his power, his confidence, his control, couldn't say a word. Because for the first time, the truth feels real. It's not coming from anonymous sources or gossip blogs. It's coming from his own blood, from the people who knew him best, who lived with him, who saw the real Diddy when the cameras weren't rolling. Their message was simple: they want peace. They want the world to see the truth, even if it destroys everything Diddy built. Because for them, this isn't about fame or revenge, it's about freedom. Freedom from the weight of secrets that should have never been theirs to carry. And now, the world is watching to see how Diddy responds, watching to see if others step forward, watching to see if this confession becomes the moment that finally exposes everything he's been hiding. What his daughters have done isn't just brave, it's world-shattering. They've taken down the walls of silence around one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. And no matter what happens next, one thing is clear: there's no going back. The truth is out, and it's changed everything.